They say that blood is thicker than water, but in the world of high society, gold is thicker than both. I stood on the grand balcony of our ancestral estate, my raven black hair whipped by the cold wind, looking down at the gala below. I wore a sapphire blue silk gown that matched the coldness in my eyes. Below me, the two people I loved most in the world were dancing. My husband Julian with his golden blonde hair and that golden boy smile that had fooled the world's elite for a decade. And beside him, clinging to his arm like a crown jewel, was my stepsister Isabella. Her fiery red hair was a sharp contrast to my darkness, a flame that thought it could burn down my world without getting scorched. They thought I was upstairs crying. They thought they had finally outsmarted the Ice Queen. They had no idea that from this height, they didn't look like royalty. They looked like ants stepping into a trap I had spent 3 years perfecting. The betrayal didn't start with a kiss, it started with a ledger. 3 years ago, I discovered that Julian wasn't just cheating on me. He was conspiring with Isabella to rewrite my father's will. They wanted the Cavendish fortune, the real estate empire, and the legacy that came with my name. I remember sitting in the library, my raven black hair falling over old financial documents, realizing that my husband and my sister were planning to have me declared mentally unfit so they could take control of everything. Most women would have filed for divorce. Most sisters would have screamed, but I am a Cavendish. We don't scream. We calculate. I looked at Julian's signature on a fraudulent transfer and made a choice. If they wanted my empire so badly, I would give it to them. I would give them every single crumbling, debt-ridden inch of it. For 36 months, I played the part of the unsuspecting, fragile wife. I wore the sapphire blue dresses he liked. I attended the charities Isabella chaired. Every morning, I watched Julian fix his expensive silk tie, his golden blonde hair perfectly coiffed, while he lied to my face about late-night board meetings. I knew those meetings were held in the penthouse I had anonymously helped Isabella purchase. I watched their hidden cameras as they toasted to my downfall, laughing about how easy I was to manipulate. Isabella, with her fiery red hair and predatory eyes, would talk about how she couldn't wait to wear my mother's diamonds. What she didn't know was that the diamonds were already in a safety deposit box in Switzerland. Replaced by high-quality cubic zirconia, they were stealing glass thinking it was crystal. The plan required surgical precision. As the primary trustee of the Cavendish estate, I began a series of aggressive expansions. I took out massive, high-interest loans in the company's name, using our most prestigious properties as collateral. On paper, the company looked like it was growing 10 times its size. In reality, I was hollow at the core. I moved the liquid assets, the real cash, into a private offshore trust that only I could access. To anyone looking at the surface, like the arrogant Julian, we were becoming the most powerful family in the country. But to an expert, the Cavendish empire was a ticking time bomb of debt, held together by nothing but my silence. I was the architect of a beautiful golden ruin, and I was about to hand over the keys. Tonight was the night of the grand handover. At this gala, Julian and Isabella expected me to sign over my remaining voting shares due to my failing health. I walked down the grand staircase, the train of my sapphire blue gown hissing against the marble. Julian approached me, his golden blonde hair glowing under the chandeliers. He took my hand, his touch making my skin crawl. "You look tired, Lydia," he whispered with fake concern. "After tonight, you can finally rest. Isabella and I will handle everything." I looked past him to Isabella, whose fiery red hair looked like a warning sign. She smiled at me, a sharp, triumphant expression. She was already wearing the fake diamonds. She looked like a queen, but she was just a placeholder for a disaster. The board of directors gathered in the private study. The room smelled of expensive cigars and old money. I sat at the mahogany desk, the light catching the raven black of my hair. The documents were laid out before me. If I signed these, Julian and Isabella would become the sole directors of Cavendish Holdings. They would inherit the prestige, the title, and unbeknownst to them, $400 million in immediate, unpayable debt. Are you sure about this, Lydia? One of the older board members asked. I looked at Julian, who was practically vibrating with greed. I looked at Isabella, who was already mentally redecorating my house. I've never been more sure of anything, I said. My hand didn't shake as I signed the papers. I handed the pen to Julian. He signed it with a flourish, his golden blonde hair falling over his eyes. He thought he had just won the world. The moment the ink was dry, the air in the room changed. I stood up, smoothing my sapphire blue gown. It's done, I said quietly. Isabella stepped forward, no longer hiding her disdain. Finally, she hissed, her fiery red hair seeming to bristle. You can take your things and leave, Lydia. This house, this company, it belongs to people who actually know how to lead. Julian didn't even look at me. He was too busy pouring a glass of celebratory scotch. She's right, Lydia. We've tolerated you long enough. The Ice Queen is officially melted. I walked to the door, but before I left, I paused. I turned back to look at them, the golden boy and the red-haired fox, standing in the middle of their new kingdom. Oh, Julian, I said, my voice as calm as a frozen lake. I almost forgot. There's a delivery arriving in exactly 10 minutes. It's the quarterly audit report from the creditors. You see, I haven't been entirely honest about the company's growth. We didn't expand. We borrowed. Every cent of the Cavendish fortune is gone. In fact, we are $400 million in the red. The glass in Julian's hand shattered. The scotch soaked into his expensive designer suit. Isabella's face went from triumphant to ghostly pale, her fiery red hair now a stark contrast to her bloodless skin. What are you talking about? She shrieked. That's impossible. The book showed billions. I smiled, and for the first time in 3 years, it was a real smile. The books you saw were the ones I wrote for you. The real books, the ones the banks have, are far less kind. Since you are now the sole directors, the personal guarantees I signed last month now fall entirely on your shoulders. You don't own an empire, Julian. You own a mountain of debt that will take 10 lifetimes to pay back. And because of the fraudulent expansion clauses I included, the banks have the right to seize your personal assets immediately. Your cars, your jewelry, Isabella's penthouse, even the suit you're wearing. I watched as the reality hit them like a physical blow. Julian collapsed into the chair I had just vacated, his golden blonde hair disheveled. Isabella began to scream, but her voice was drowned out by the sound of sirens approaching the estate. You can't do this, Julian yelled, his voice cracking. I'll sue you. I'll tell them you tricked us. I walked back to the desk and leaned down, my raven black hair brushing his shoulder. Tell them whatever you want, Julian. You signed the documents voluntarily. You wanted the power so badly you didn't even bother to read the fine print. You were so distracted by Isabella's red hair and my failing health that you walked right into a burning building. I turned to my sister. Enjoy the diamonds, Isabella. I hope the cubic zirconia shines brightly in the mugshot photos. I didn't wait for a response. I walked out of the study through the gala and out the front door. As I stepped into my waiting car, I looked back at the Cavendish estate. It was a beautiful house, but it was built on lies. Tonight, those lies were finally being exposed. I felt a sense of lightness I hadn't felt in years. My raven black hair was smooth, my sapphire blue gown unwrinkled. I had lost a husband and a sister, but I had gained my freedom. And more importantly, I had kept the real Cavendish fortune, the offshore accounts they never found. As the car pulled away, I saw the flashing lights of the police and the debt collectors arriving at the front gate. The golden boy was being led out in handcuffs, his golden blonde hair a mess, his expensive suit a symbol of his ruin. Isabella was right behind him, Her fiery red hair tangled as she struggled against the officers. The game was over. They had tried to steal my life, so I gave them a version of it that would destroy them. I opened my handbag and took out a small velvet box. Inside was my mother's real diamond necklace, the one Isabella thought she was wearing. It sparkled in the moonlight, a cold, hard truth. I leaned back against the leather seat and closed my eyes. Tomorrow, I would be on a plane to Switzerland. Tomorrow, I would start a new life under a new name. But tonight, I would simply enjoy the silence. The Ice Queen hadn't melted. She had simply moved to a colder climate, leaving the fire to burn itself out in the ruins of a glass empire.
What would you do if you were in this situation? Let's talk in the comments.